The first wave hit without warning. One moment, Alara was wiping down the sticky laminate of a diner booth, the cloying scent of stale coffee and burnt sugar clinging to the air. The next, a liquid fire bloomed low in her belly, coiling through her veins with a terrifying, inexorable heat. It was a deep, primal thrum, a biological command she'd spent 18 years dreading. Her scent, meticulously suppressed under layers of cheap, neutralizing soap and sheer willpower, tore through its chemical prison. It bloomed into the stale air like a hothouse flower in a morgue, wild honey, night-blooming jasmine, and a shocking, electric undertone of summer thunderstorms. Her breath hitched. The worn rag fell from her nerveless fingers. Every sound in the crowded diner seemed to fall away, replaced by the frantic drumming of her own heart. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here. Not now. Not ever, if she could have helped it. She was a stray, a ghost on the edge of the Stone Creek Pack's territory, surviving on meekness and invisibility. An unbonded Omega presenting her first heat in a public place was not invisible. She was a signal flare fired into the darkest night. Slowly, as if moving through water, she lifted her head. The shift was instantaneous and absolute. The low chatter of the diner had ceased. Forks were frozen halfway to mouths. But it wasn't the betas or the handful of human patrons who held her captive. It was the alphas. 3 of them, scattered at different tables, who had previously been nothing more than background noise. Now, their eyes were fixed on her, pupils blown wide, a predatory stillness seizing their frames. The air grew thick, charged with a sudden, suffocating pressure. Their sense, which she'd been trained since childhood to ignore, now slammed into her with physical force. One, a burly woman in a leather jacket, radiated a scent of scorched sugar and aggressive musk, her possessive gaze a physical weight. Another, sharp-suited and severe, smelled of acrid smoke and ambition, a thin smile playing on her lips that held no warmth. The third was younger, her scent a raw, unrefined wave of dominance that promised violence. They were sharks that had just caught the first trace of blood in the water. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the feverish haze of her heat. She had to run. Her legs, trembling and unsteady, pushed her back from the table. The scrape of her worn sneakers on the linoleum was a gunshot in the silence. She fumbled for the exit, her vision tunneling, every instinct screaming at her to flee, to find a hole, to disappear. "Going somewhere, little one?" The voice was a low growl from the woman in the leather jacket. She was already on her feet, blocking the path to the door. Alara flinched, a whimper catching in her throat. The jasmine and honey of her own scent intensified with her fear, a traitorous beacon. She was cornered. A prize to be fought over, claimed, and broken. This was the fate her mother had died to save her from. A gilded cage, a collar, a life that was not her own. The faces of the alphas blurred into a single, hungry maw. Her past was catching up to her, and it wore the face of a predator. Just as the first alpha took a step forward, the diner's bell chimed, a sound so incongruous it was jarring. The door swung inward, admitting a slice of the cold night air and a presence that instantly altered the room's oppressive atmosphere. The suffocating blanket of territorial aggression was sliced through by a new scent, one that was nothing like the others. It wasn't hot and cloying, it was cool and sharp, like the air after a lightning strike, clean ozone and the cold, pure scent of silver. Every alpha in the room stiffened, their predatory focus shifting from Alara to the newcomer. A woman stood silhouetted in the doorway, tall and impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored coat. Moonlight caught the silver clasp of her collar, a stark contrast to the black fabric. Her face, when she stepped into the diner's dim light, was a study in controlled power. High cheekbones, a severe jawline, and eyes the color of a winter storm. Seraphina, the Pack's enforcer. The alpha of alphas. Her gaze swept the room, dismissive and absolute. It lingered for a fraction of a second on the cowering omegas and betas, passed over the frozen alphas with contemptuous authority, and then it landed on Alara. For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Those gray eyes locked onto hers, and Alara felt stripped bare, not just as an Omega in heat, but as something more, something hidden deep beneath her skin. Seraphina's expression didn't change, but Alara felt the intensity of her focus as a physical touch, a shiver that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with a terrifying, instinctual recognition. "Leave," Seraphina said. Her voice was calm, quiet, yet it carried the unquestionable weight of command. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. The leather-clad Alpha bristled. "She's unclaimed, Seraphina." "Pack law." "The law," Seraphina interrupted, her voice dropping even lower, colder, "is what I say it is. Now is not the time to test that. Go." A tense silence stretched, thick with the clash of unseen power. The scent of ozone and silver intensified, a clear, sharp warning that promised retribution. Finally, with a snarl of frustrated rage, the first Alpha backed down, turning and storming out of the diner. The other two followed, their shoulders slumped in defeat, casting venomous glances at Alara as they left. The diner exhaled. The spell was broken. Patrons began to murmur, pointedly looking anywhere but at the two figures left standing in the center of the room. Alara was still trembling, her body a war zone of hormonal fire and adrenaline-laced fear. Seraphina closed the distance between them in 3 silent strides. Up close, her scent was overwhelming, a clean, powerful wave that paradoxically soothed the ragged edges of Alara's panic even as it sent a new, different kind of alarm through her system. It was the scent of a perfectly forged cage, beautiful and inescapable. "You," Seraphina said, her voice a low murmur meant only for Alara. "You will come with me." Her hand closed around Alara's upper arm. The touch was firm, not brutal, but it brooked no argument. It was the touch of an owner claiming property. And as Alara was led out into the cold night, away from the wreckage of her hidden life, she knew the freedom she had cherished was over. She was now in the hands of the most dangerous Alpha in the city, and her greatest secret, the one that pulsed beneath her Omega skin, was in more danger than ever before. The car was a black, silent predator, slicing through the neon-slicked streets of the city. Alara sat pressed against the passenger door, as far from Seraphina as she could manage. The space was still too small. The Enforcer's scent filled the enclosed cabin, a constant, overwhelming presence that made the air feel thin. It wrapped around Alara's own frantic pheromones, not suppressing them, but containing them. It was a terrifyingly intimate sensation. They hadn't spoken a word since leaving the diner. Seraphina drove with an economy of motion, her gloved hands sure on the wheel, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Her profile was like something carved from marble, impassive and severe. Alara's mind raced, a frantic animal in a trap. This wasn't protection. This was a claiming. She had seen the way the other Alphas looked at her. Seraphina had simply been the strongest, the one to win the prize. She was being taken to a den, a gilded cage where she would be kept until her heat passed and she could be permanently collared. Her hands clenched in her lap. She would not let that happen. She would die first. The car finally slowed, turning into a private underground garage beneath a sleek, anonymous tower of glass and steel. The gate slid shut behind them with a heavy, final thud. A prison door. Seraphina led her to a private elevator, her hand a constant, firm pressure on the small of Alara's back. The silence was deafening, broken only by the quiet hum of the elevator's ascent. The apartment, a penthouse, Alara realized with a sinking heart, was vast and sterile. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a breathtaking, panoramic view of the city lights, a galaxy of captured stars. But the beauty was cold, impersonal. The furniture was minimalist, all sharp angles and monochrome shades of black, white, and gray. There was no clutter, no sign of personal life. It was less a home and more a fortress. "You will stay here," Seraphina stated, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. She finally released Alara, who stumbled back a step, wrapping her arms around herself. "I am not your property," Alara bit out, the words tasting like ash. Her defiance felt small and pointless in this vast, empty space, but she had to try. Serafina turned, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow rising a fraction of an inch. No? Then what are you? An unbonded Omega, broadcasting her first heat to every predator in a 5-mile radius. In my territory. That makes you my problem. And I, she said, taking a slow step closer, always deal with my problems. The proximity made Alara's head swim. The fever of her heat was rising again, a treacherous tide pulling her under. Serafina's cool, silver scent was a balm against the fire, an instinctual promise of safety that her conscious mind screamed to reject. I don't need your protection, Alara insisted, her voice trembling. This is not about what you need, Serafina replied, her voice dangerously soft. This is about order. Your condition creates chaos. It makes the other alphas reckless. It is a threat to the stability I maintain, she paused, her gray eyes narrowing as she studied Alara's face. Your scent, it is unusually potent. Stronger than any I have encountered. Alara's blood ran cold. She knows. She senses it. Beneath the overwhelming signal of an Omega in Estrus was another layer, a deeper truth she had to keep hidden at all costs. It was the scent of the wild, of the moon, of something that did not belong in these concrete canyons. The scent of a true wolf, a Lycaon, a strain thought to be extinct for centuries. Her mother had been one, and they had been hunted for it. Another wave of heat, stronger this time, crashed over her. Her knees buckled. A pained gasp escaped her lips as fire lanced through her, so intense it was agonizing. Before she could hit the cold marble floor, strong arms were around her, catching her. Serafina held her, and the contact was electric. Alara's feverish skin burned against the cool fabric of Serafina's coat. Easy, Serafina murmured, her voice losing some of its hard edge. It was a command, but it was laced with something else, something that sounded almost like concern. She half-lifted, half-guided Alara towards a starkly furnished bedroom. You need to rest. Alara fought against the dizzying pull of her own body, the instinct to surrender to this powerful alpha who offered a strange, terrifying kind of sanctuary. No, let me go. But her protests were weak, her body betraying her. Serafina laid her down on a large bed with crisp, cool sheets. The room was as impersonal as the rest of the apartment, dominated by another massive window overlooking the city. A cage with a view. Serafina stood over her, a tall, shadowy figure against the city lights. You will fight this every step of the way, won't you? It wasn't a question. Alara glared up at her, her vision blurring with fever and unshed tears. To my last breath. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable crossed Serafina's face. It wasn't anger or annoyance. It looked almost like respect. Then your last breath may come sooner than you think, she said, her voice once again cool and distant. The alphas I turned away at the diner were merely opportunistic scavengers. But a scent like yours does not go unnoticed. It will draw far worse things out of the shadows. Things that even I may have trouble controlling. She turned and left, the bedroom door clicking shut behind her. It wasn't the sound of a lock, but it might as well have been. Alara was alone, trapped in the den of the city's most powerful predator, her body burning with a fever that threatened to betray the very secret that kept her alive. The scent of ozone and silver lingered in the air, a constant reminder of her beautiful, formidable jailer. Outside, the city lights glittered like the eyes of 1,000 hungry wolves, and Alara knew this was only the beginning. The next 24 hours were a blur of fever and fragmented nightmares. Alara drifted in and out of consciousness, trapped in the merciless grip of her heat. The world narrowed to the silk sheets beneath her, the agonizing fire within her, and the distant, rhythmic sounds of Serafina's presence in the apartment. The quiet click of a keyboard, the soft tread of footsteps on the marble floor, the clink of glass. Each sound was a reminder of her captivity. Twice, Serafina entered the room. The first time, she placed a tray with a glass of water and some plain crackers on the bedside table. She didn't speak, her movements efficient and detached. But Alara, through the haze of her fever, felt the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Serafina's scent, usually so controlled, had a sharper edge, a tension that betrayed her calm exterior. She was affected. The thought was both terrifying and strangely satisfying. The second time was worse. A particularly violent wave of cramps seized Alara, wresting a raw cry of pain from her throat. The door opened almost immediately. Serafina stood there, her expression unreadable in the dim light. She watched for a long moment as Alara curled into a tight ball, teeth gritted against the agony. Then she moved to the bed, sitting on the edge. The dip in the mattress made Alara flinch. "Breathe," Serafina commanded softly. She placed a hand on Alara's shoulder. Her palm was cool, the touch sending a jolt through Alara's overheated skin. It was grounding. Against her will, Alara's body relaxed a fraction, leaning into the coolness. "Beneath the honey," Serafina murmured, her voice a low vibration that seemed to travel straight through Alara's bones. "I smell it. Moonlight. Old forests. Something wild that has no place in a city." Alara's eyes snapped open, wide with panic. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Serafina's gaze was intense, searching. "I've studied the old pack histories. The stories of the first wolves. The Lycan. Their omegas were said to have scents that could drive alphas to madness or bring them to their knees. A scent that signaled a power far greater than mere submission." Her hand moved from Alara's shoulder, her fingers gently brushing a stray, sweat-dampened strand of hair from Alara's forehead. The gesture was so unexpectedly tender it stole Alara's breath. They were hunted to extinction. Their power was considered a threat to the rigid Alpha-Beta-Omega hierarchy. A true Omega could, it was said, choose her Alpha or choose none at all. She could even break the bonds of others. Alara stared at her, heart hammering against her ribs. The secret she had guarded her whole life, laid bare by the one person who had the power to destroy her utterly. "You are afraid of the wrong things, little wolf," Serafina continued, her voice barely a whisper. "You fear being collared, caged. But a creature like you cannot be caged by a common alpha. A common collar would melt in the heat of your fire." Her thumb brushed against Alara's cheek. "What you should fear is the one who would seek to forge a collar of silver and shadow, one strong enough to hold you. One who understands what you are and wants to possess that power, not just your body." A sudden, loud crash from the living area made them both jolt. Serafina was on her feet in an instant, her entire demeanor shifting from quiet intensity to lethal readiness. Her cool scent sharpened, flooding the air with the promise of violence. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice like cracking ice. "Do not make a sound." She was gone before Alara could respond. Alara pushed herself up, her body screaming in protest. Adrenaline surged through her, a cold counterpoint to the heat in her veins. She could hear voices now. A harsh, guttural female voice and Serafina's, low and deadly. "You have no right, Kale," Serafina's voice carried clearly. "This is my sanctuary. Your sanctuary now stinks of the greatest prize this city has seen in a century." The other voice, Kale's, snarled. "Did you think you could keep her for yourself, Enforcer? The elders have been notified. An Omega of this power belongs to the Council, to be assigned for the good of the pack." A cold dread washed over Alara. The Council. A group of ancient, ruthless alphas who ruled the packs with iron fists. They were the ones who had ordered the purge of the Lycan. If they knew what she was. The sound of a struggle, a sharp thud, a gasp, the snarl of an alpha losing control, propelled Alara from the bed. Her protective instincts, a fierce, primal force she hadn't known she possessed, overwhelmed her Omega biology. She wasn't just prey to be protected. Serafina, the woman who had caged her, was in danger. She stumbled into the living room to a scene of chaos. The large window was shattered, glittering shards of glass littering the floor. Two massive alphas, both reeking of ambition and bloodlust, were flanking Serafina. One was Kale, the leather-clad woman from the diner. Serafina held her own, a blur of deadly grace, but she was outnumbered. As Alara watched, the second alpha lunged, catching Serafina from behind. Kale seized the opening, landing a vicious blow to Serafina's side. Serafina grunted in pain, staggering back. Her sharp, silver scent was now tinged with the metallic tang of blood. Something inside Alara snapped. A dam of control that had held for 18 years shattered into a million pieces. The fire of her heat was no longer just a biological imperative, it became fuel. Power, raw and untamed, surged up from the core of her being. Her bones lengthened, her skin split, and a howl tore from her throat, not the cry of a human, but the full-throated, soul-shaking cry of a wolf. Silver-white fur erupted across her skin. Her vision sharpened, the world exploding into 1,000 shades of gray and brilliant scent trails. The cramped penthouse felt impossibly small. She was a creature of moonlight and forest, ancient and powerful, unleashed in a cage of glass and steel. The two alphas froze, their eyes wide with disbelief and primal fear. The scent of a true Omega in her first heat was one thing. The sight of a living, breathing Lycaon, larger and more powerful than any modern wolf-shifter, was another. Seraphina, leaning against a wall and clutching her side, stared at Alara. But her expression held no fear. In her stormy gray eyes, there was only a fierce, blazing awe. So, the legends are true, she breathed. Alara didn't hesitate. With a snarl that shook the remaining glass in its frames, she launched herself at Kale.